In this video we'll be looking at time series and using them with moving averages. We're going to calculate 4 pointing moving averages, and we're also going to draw trend lines through the moving averages by eye. So first of all, let's talk about what is a moving average. So if you have your notes in front of you, you should have a definition ready to be filled in. So a moving average is an average worked out for a given number of successive observations. Okay, great. Well, that's a definition you can write down, but what does that actually mean? What's that actually talking about? Well, if we go back to our time series graph from last time, we can have a little look of what this actually means. So let's say we were looking at the ice cream sales over these number of years, and we're wanting to look at moving averages. Well, we could find out the average number of sales in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. But a moving average looks at 4 quarters next to each other. So what we'd be looking at is 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'd find the average of these 4 quarters. And what's good about that is that in that 4 quarters, each one of 3, 4, 1, 2 are taken. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, I'd find the average of those, and I'd plot that on maybe like wherever that would be in the middle. Okay, then the next one, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got 4, 1, 2, 3. Once again, 4 quarters. And then the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this case, it really is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So each time I'm taking the average of 4 quarters and I'd plot them on. In a minute, we're going to look at how we'd actually do that. We just want to talk about the advantage of this. The advantage of this is that you're taking the average, which includes all 4 quarters. If I just took 2 next to each other, for example, if the 2 quarters that I took next to each other were spring and summer, well then the ice cream sales are going to look quite high potentially, or if they're autumn and winter, maybe not so high. So it's really important when we take these that you take the number of points in each moving average should cover 1 complete cycle of season. So if you've got 4 quarters, you need to do it per quarters, and it is normally a 4-point moving average, but if you had it 3 times in the year, then you take 3 points. So this makes sure that each moving average contains 1 reading from each season. In this case, the seasons are literally spring, summer, autumn, winter, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, but it could be any season of time. So that's what we're looking at for moving averages, and hopefully you filled in the definition and the notes that look at the definition. And when we plot them on, it's going to help us see the trend a bit more clearly over time, rather than the seasons that can make it a little confusing to look at sometimes. Okay, so let's look at a worked example. In this worked example, we're looking at quarterly car sales over a 2-year period. So in this case, you've got the first 4 quarters, and then instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, they've done 5, 6, 7, 8. So you've got the first year and the second year, and the number of cars sold. So first of all, we need to find the 4-point moving averages and then plot them on a time series graph. So let's find the 4-point moving averages first. So our first point is going to be taking 1, 2, 3, 4, so finding the average of these 4 numbers. And when we say average, we are in fact talking about the mean. So we're just going to, for the first point, add up the first 4 scores, 16 plus 26 plus 30 plus 24, and to find the average we would then divide them by 4 because we've taken 4 values, and that's going to give us the value of 24. So our first point is 24. Okay, we're now going to do the same as many times as we can. So for the second point, you notice that I've taken these 4 here points, and so for the next one I'm going to start here and go 1, 2, 3, 4 and take those 4. And for the next one I'm going to start at the 4th number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and likewise for the 5th number, start at the 5th number. Now at this point something slightly different is going to happen, because if I did the 6th point, I'd have 6, 7, 8, I'd only actually have 3 points, and I've got to do 4-point moving average, so I now stop because I don't have any more. So these are all my moving averages. As soon as you don't have enough points you stop, and that's enough moving averages. So we found the 4-point moving averages, and now we need to plot them on a time series graph. So here's my axes, and so first of all, I'm going to just plot the normal time series with this data here, which you learnt how to do last time. Okay, so there's our time series graph, and you might want to pause now so that you can draw your own time series graph on your worksheet. We're now going to look at plotting the averages. So if we look at the first one, the first point is going to be at 24, but then how far along are we going to put it? Well, it's the average of points 1, 2, 3 and 4. So I need to find the average of 1, 2, 3 and 4 by adding them together and dividing by 4. So if I add them together I get 10, I divide by 4 I get 2.5, and that makes sense in fact, because if you look here, the middle of here is going to be here. Now I recommend having a different colour if you have a different colour, or doing dots for one and crosses for another, or something like that, just so you can clearly show that these are no longer just the quarterly observations, these are in fact the moving averages. So this one, I'm going to plot 2.5 across and 24 up. So my red dot is my moving average. Okay, I'm now going to do this for all of these. In each case, finding the average of the numbers it is. So this, for the next one, will be the average of 2, 3, 4 and 5. So I'll add them together, 14 divided by 4, which is 3.5. So the first one was 2.5, next one 3.5, and in fact they go up like that. So that was 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. I'm just going to plot all those points on. So now hopefully you can see I've got all my moving averages. And this shows me of each time period, these times average, average, and you can see the trend a lot easier here because there's not so much variation. The general trend is increasing. So if we were going to comment on this, we'd say, you know, a rising trend, an upwards trend generally, but also it's good to contextualise. What does that mean in context to the question? Well, the question is talking about quarterly car sales. So that shows you that over the 2 years, the car sales have risen. So if we just write in your part B on your notes, if we just add in a note about that. And your part B should look something like that. Okay, well, if we look back at our learning objectives, we have calculated a 4-point moving average. We've done that, but we haven't got on to drawing trend lines through moving averages by eye yet. So that's what we're going to look at next. So we're going to return to our graph and we're going to look at trend lines for this. Now this is different from the general line because we're not going to join these up dot to dot. We're going to do a line of best fit through the moving averages. So you should be using a ruler and there should be roughly equal numbers of points above and below the line. Something like this. Okay, and this helps us see even more clearly that the general trend over the 2 years is an upward one. And in fact, sometimes the trend line can show us even more than that, and we'll look at a couple more questions to help clarify. Let's say you're given data in a different format first of all. So you've got shopkeeper's takings in thousands of pounds in each quarter of 3 successive years. So your first year, your first 4 quarters, second year, third year. And in this case, if you're finding the 4-point moving average, sometimes they leave the table in this sort of format. And this is what they expect you to do. If you're taking the average for the first 4 numbers, then you do your calculation in this box here. So you'd add them together, divide by 4 and write that all out in here. Then your next 4, you'd write here, and so on. All the way down, and for your last 4, you'll put those in this box. Okay, that's just another way of laying it out so you can see it can look like that. And in fact, I'm going to fill in this table with the moving averages and the time series graph just so you can see what the trend lines uses can be. Okay, so here's that data calculated and visualised. Now what I'm actually missing from my graph here is a bit of a key to tell me what represents what. The crosses represent the quarterly observations and the squares represent the 4-point moving averages. Okay, now we were going to look at trend lines with this, so I'm going to draw on a trend line here. Okay, and from my trend line I can see a couple of things. I can see a slight increase over the years, but I can also notice clear things like the third quarter is always way above the trend line. It helps you see seasonal variation really easily, and you can see which ones are always below the trend line, which ones are these ones are just below, basically on, but here your first quarter each year is way below and your third is way above. So you can give a much clearer idea of the trend based on your trend line than just generally a general rising trend. You can specify which quarters are particularly above or below the trend. And ideally, you might want to come up with some reason as to why that is. If this is a shopkeeper, it would depend what kind of shop it is. For example, an ice cream shop or a hot chocolate shop might change over the seasons and the quarters. Now, if you have a go at the questions, practice questions on your worksheet to practice these skills.